So I'm Paul Honigmann. I've been keeping bees for 14 years in top bar and warre hives. I have a scientific and engineering background, so I'm not very dogmatic. I'll do what works, and I'll throw out evidence if it doesn't agree with theories if it doesn't agree with what I see. I live in Oxfordshire, which is central England, so a very mild climate, surrounded by lots of wild bees. It turns out when you go look. I started the Oxfordshire Natural Beekeeping Group about 12 years ago, which has snowballed. It's about a third the size of the local formal beekeeping association. And it's a sort of local group of enthusiasts who like alternative beekeeping. And we experiment with all kinds of things from log hives and skeps to framed hives. And about the only thing we have in common is that we don't treat for mites. So anyway, I have quite a wide experience through this family, if you like, this extended family of all kinds of beekeeping. And I found people were coming to me as the founder and asking me questions. So that led to me training people. I'm a member of Colos, BIBA, and the local beekeeping association. So the Observant Beekeeper was written because I couldn't find the book I wanted. And what I wanted was all the information that people hinted at was out there, but you could never actually find. Things like, how do you interpret the behavior of a hive just by looking at it without ripping it open? Things like, how did people look after hives before Varroa came? And why can't you find anything other than the same information, surface information, repeated on the web time after time? And when you actually want to know more about diseases, people just talk about half a dozen of them because that's the only ones they've ever come across. So I did a deep dive. I looked into research and I talked to scientists and I read a lot of papers. When I found old beekeepers who remembered ancient ways of doing things, I quizzed them extensively. They probably came to fear me and my little notebook. And I looked into the old beekeeping books and mined them for information. So we've ended up with something with 400 pages of dense information, but it's not dense text because there's 400 graphics, photographs to illustrate points. Graphics are drawn to show how things go together and pull out particular points that wouldn't be clear on a photograph. There's 400 odd footnotes referencing scientific papers and other information to back up what I'm saying or to expand on points in the main part of the text. But overall, if you imagine how web articles are written, where everybody knows there's not much attention span in a web reader, that's how people read. That's how they've always read, but we pretend it's a modern phenomenon. And so you don't find seas of text, you find an enormously concise kind of format of information there, where I compress, for example, a book on skeps in my book is like a third of a chapter because I've just drawn diagrams to bring out points rather than use 25 pages to explain how you turn a skep upside down and bump it. The primary audience was isolated natural beekeepers because the training I do, I train 4 to 6 people at once, and you can't train many people that way. And I just felt you can get the information out to more people through a book. You can also go into it in much deeper detail, and people can read through a chapter to the level they want. Whereas when you train people, you can only go at the speed of the person who knows the least. The observant beekeeper. Well, what I'm trying to emphasize is that people should slow down and really evaluate what they're looking at. Partly this is because people leap to conclusions. So if you look on forums, for example, people say, I've got this problem, and they'll start describing it. And 2 out of 3 answers say, oh, it's Varroa. It's very rarely Varroa. If you actually read the original query, it's something completely different. But people jump to conclusions. They like easy conclusions. Problem sorted, done, next. And that's a problem in beekeeping and in many aspects of modern life. People are in a hurry. They don't slow down. They don't evaluate. They don't consider options or what other things it might be. And they don't take joy in what they're doing either. And that's been lost in a lot of beekeeping. It's become too industrial and less of a hobby. So once you begin really looking at things, you realize that a lot of the stuff you're told, particularly online, just isn't so. Um, I'm also trying to emphasize the fact that you can be kinder and gentler with your bees. You don't always need to rip the hive open and chill everything and lose the nest atmosphere and destroy the structures they've made in there. You can watch from outside and tell quite a lot of what's going on. And sometimes you do need to open the hive, but not every time. So you're probably wondering, is this book for you? Well, it is if you're one of the following categories. You might be a treatment-free beekeeper who's surrounded by people who can't give you advice because they are unaware of this path. So an isolated natural beekeeper. You might be an advanced conventional beekeeper who is looking to find out a bit more about what happened historically or on the fringes of current science and practice, and who just wants to know more about the lost lore of beekeeping. There was an awful lot of stuff that people used to do that just went by the wayside when we began dousing hives with chemicals to treat varroa in the 90s. It will, I think, be of interest to scientists because one of the aspects that it does is it covers a lot of the obscure behaviors which have been noted by beekeepers. So it's what's the word? Anecdotal evidence in places. And then when you find that you got lots of anecdotes relating the same thing, that begins to become an interesting observation. And there's something going on there. It may not be hard data which you can quantify yet, but there's something you want to research there. And I think it may be of use to people who train beekeepers because it's got a lot of stuff there presented in a much more digestible way than many of the dry manuals you've got. It's not about production of honey and making money, and it's not about queen breeding. So those are two areas where I felt those areas are covered by other books in great detail. Why repeat that? I'll have more room to put the unusual stuff in if I leave that out. So I encourage you to buy the book and get back into the joy of beekeeping.